The war had lasted for decades. Across the galaxy of Kael'thar, countless worlds had burned under the shadow of battle. The proud empire of Varathis, ruled by King Tharok of the Xylar people, had once been a beacon of strength and honor. Now it was a land scarred by endless fighting. Every victory brought loss. Every loss brought grief. King Tharok was a warrior by nature. He wore his scars like medals. His armor, black and gold, told stories of wars won and enemies crushed. But no battle had left a deeper wound than the one he carried in his heart. His only daughter, Princess Zaira, had been lost in the bloodiest battle the Empire had ever faced. It had happened on the moon of Sirinth. The moon was a fortress world, rich in resources and vital to the survival of Varathis. The Xylar fleet had been sent to hold it against a massive enemy force. Zaira had fought bravely at the front lines, leading her warriors with courage unmatched. But then the enemy had struck in a sudden attack. Chaos had swept the battlefield. Screams of soldiers filled the air. The sky itself seemed to burn. When the smoke cleared, Zaira was gone. No body, no trace, only rumors. The council declared her lost. The people mourned. Tharok felt as if part of himself had been torn away. He could not rest. His grief turned into anger. His anger became resolve. He swore to crush the enemy who took his daughter, no matter the cost. Years passed. War continued. Entire star systems fell, but Sirinth remained lost to them. Tharok poured himself into battle, leading campaigns across the galaxy. His soldiers respected him. His enemies feared him. But in the quiet moments, he would stand alone in his private chamber and stare at the stars, always wondering if Zaira still lived. Then one day, a messenger came with impossible news. A ship unmarked but carrying Xylar markings had entered Varathis space. Its captain claimed to bring the princess back. King Tharok's heart thundered. Could it be true? Could his daughter have survived all these years? The council was skeptical. They warned him not to believe until the truth was certain. But Tharok would not wait. He ordered the ship to be brought to the capital. The great gates of Varathis Prime opened to the arrival of the ship. It was unlike anything seen in Varathis before. Its hull shimmered faintly and the engines pulsed with an unfamiliar energy. Soldiers lined the streets, curious and uneasy. The news had spread quickly and the princess was returning. And there was someone with her. When the ship's hatch opened, silence fell. Zaira stepped forward. Her armor was battered, her face worn with years of hardship, but her eyes burned with life. Behind her walked a man, human. His presence stunned everyone. Humans were rare in the outer galaxy, and few had ever seen one up close. His armor was strange, with clean lines and strange symbols. His steps were steady, confident. King Tharok moved through the crowd, his long cloak flowing behind him. He stopped before his daughter, searching her face for answers. "Zaira," he said, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "You live." Zaira lowered her gaze. "Father," she said softly, "I have returned, but not alone." She gestured to the human behind her. "This is Captain Elias Kane. He saved my life." A murmur spread through the gathered crowd. Whispers turned to questions. The name human carried suspicion. The humans had not taken part in this war. Their presence here was a mystery. Some saw Kane as a savior, others as a threat. King Tharok stared at the human. Kane met his gaze without flinching. There was no fear in him, only calm. "Your Highness," Kane said respectfully, "I did what I had to do. Princess Zaira was in danger. I could not leave her behind." Tharok's voice was low, almost a growl. "Why is a human in Varathis? Why are you here?" Kane's answer was simple. "Because there is something coming. Something worse than this war. We need allies." The word struck Tharok like a blade. He had fought for decades to protect his people. But could this human be speaking truth? Could the princess's return mean more than just her survival? The Council of Varathis Prime gathered that night. The chamber was vast, carved from dark stone lit by glowing crystal lamps. Tharok stood before them, Zaira at his side, Kane guarded but present. The council's voices rose and fell, debating the human's presence. Some demanded Kane be executed. Others suggested using him as a key to unknown alliances. Zaira's voice rang out above the noise. "Father, listen to him," she said. "He saved me. He has knowledge we must hear. Please, let him speak." Tharok's gaze lingered on his daughter. For years he had fought without her. Now she stood before him, alive and changed. Yet his heart was heavy with doubt. Trust was not easily given in war. Finally, Tharok spoke. Tomorrow we will hear this man's words. But tonight, we prepare. War has not ended, and perhaps it has only just begun. Outside the palace, the city slept uneasily. The stars above Verathis Prime seemed colder that night. Somewhere in the galaxy, forces stirred, and the return of the princess would change everything. The morning light over Verathis Prime was pale and still. The city stirred with quiet tension. Word of Princess Zyra's return had spread through the capital like fire. Citizens gathered in the streets, whispering and watching the palace gates. Soldiers patrolled in greater numbers. The air was heavy with questions no one could answer. In the council chamber, King Tharok sat upon his throne, his black and gold armor gleaming in the glow of crystal lamps. Princess Zyra stood beside him, her shoulders straight, her expression calm but firm. Captain Elias Kane stood a short distance behind her, silent, his human armor strange and unfamiliar to the Xylar. Tharok motioned for silence. "You have been gone many cycles, my daughter," he said. "Tell us what happened." "Where were you?" Zyra drew a deep breath. "I was on Sirinth when the enemy overwhelmed our forces," she began. "The battle was fierce and chaos spread quickly. I fought to hold the line, but I was separated from my soldiers. I fell into enemy hands. A hush fell over the chamber. Even the guards stopped their movements. The war against the enemy had been fierce. To be captured was worse than death," Zyra continued. "They held me in a camp deep in enemy territory. There was no hope of rescue." Days turned to cycles. "I survived through will alone. But then when an attack came, a force unlike anything I have seen. In the chaos, I was able to escape. Captain Kane found me." Tharok's eyes narrowed. "A human soldier in the war?" "Explain this." Kane stepped forward. His voice was steady. "I am not here as an enemy. I am here because I believe we face a threat greater than any war between your peoples. I fought to save the princess because I believe her survival matters to the future of this galaxy." The council murmured. Some members looked suspicious. Others exchanged worried glances. One elder counselor stepped forward. "And why should we trust him? Humans are outsiders. We know nothing of their true intentions." Zyra's voice rang out. "I know him. He saved my life." He did not hesitate. "He fought alongside me without question." She looked at her father. "I would not return with him if I believed him to be a threat." Tharok remained silent for a long moment. His mind raced. His daughter's words carried weight, but his duty to his people was heavier. He had fought for centuries to protect Verathis. Could he risk their safety on the word of one human? Kane spoke again. "Your Highness, my world is Earth. We are explorers and fighters for survival. Our people face a danger that is beyond your current war. There is a force called the Nihil Collective. They destroy entire worlds without mercy. I came here to warn you and to seek allies. Princess Zyra's return is not by chance. It is part of what must happen for all of us to stand a chance." The council erupted in debate. Voices rose, clashing like storms. Some saw Kane's warning as truth. Others saw it as deception. Zyra stood quietly, listening, her eyes fixed on her father. Finally, Tharok raised his hand. Silence fell. "We will hear more of this human's story," he said. "But before we decide, we must know his reasons. Captain Kane, you will remain under guard until you speak before the full council. Zyra, you will remain at my side." Zyra bowed her head. Kane did not resist. The guards led him away, still watched by the murmuring assembly. Tharok remained seated, staring into the distance. Later, in his private chambers, Tharok summoned Zyra. The air between them was quiet but heavy. "You speak of trust," Tharok said softly. "But trust is earned, not given. And the return of a child lost for cycles is something I cannot measure without proof." Zyra stepped closer. "Father, I have proof. I have lived it. Kane saved me, fought for me. I know you will see it in time." Her voice carried a mix of determination and hope. Tharok turned his gaze to the window, looking out at the sprawling city below. "I have fought wars for my people," he said quietly. "But the war I face now is not just against enemies at our gates. It is a war against doubt, against fear. You must understand, Zyra. I have lost too much to give trust freely." Zyra placed her hand lightly on his arm. "Then let this be the first step, Father. Let Kane speak. Hear him fully before making your choice. This could change everything." Tharok did not reply immediately. He studied her face, searching for signs of deception, but found only truth. Still, the weight of his decision pressed heavily upon him. The future of Varathis, perhaps even of the galaxy, depended on what he decided next. The next day, the Great Council would meet. Words would be spoken, truth would be tested, and a choice would be made that could alter the fate of every world. Outside the palace, the city seemed to hold its breath. The arrival of Zyra and the human had begun a new chapter for Varathis, a chapter filled with questions, hope and danger, and somewhere far beyond the stars, the shadow of the Nihil Collective moved closer, ready to test the fragile alliances of the galaxy. The council chamber was larger than any ordinary hall, stretching high with ceilings carved from dark stone. Crystal lamps hung from above, casting soft, steady light across the polished floor. The councilors sat in semicircles, their expressions a mix of suspicion, curiosity, and worry. King Tharok stood at the center, Zyra beside him, her posture confident, her eyes calm. Captain Elias Kane stood a short distance away, flanked by 2 guards, ready but respectful. "Speak," Tharok commanded. His voice echoed in the chamber. "Tell us why you are here, human, and why the princess is alive." "The council demands answers." Kane bowed slightly. "Your Highness, counselors, I come from a world called Earth. My people explore space to learn, to survive, and to prepare for threats beyond our own systems. The war that took your daughter was not the only danger in this galaxy. There is a species called the Nihil Collective. They consume entire planets, leaving nothing behind. I have seen them destroy worlds in moments. I came here because I believe your empire and my people can stand a chance if we work together." A murmur spread through the council. Some counselors leaned forward, eager. Others shifted uneasily, suspicious of the human's words. One counselor, an elder named Vrylox, rose from his seat. His voice was sharp. "You expect us to trust a stranger from another world? We have fought wars for centuries. We do not rely on outsiders for our survival. Tell us, human, what proof do you have of this threat?" Kane's eyes met the elder's without fear. "I have data, records, and first-hand experience. I have seen entire fleets destroyed. I have seen planets fall, and Princess Zyra has seen it too. She survived because we worked together." Zyra stepped forward, her voice strong. "I will speak. I was captured in enemy territory. I saw the power of the Nihil Collective firsthand. Kane saved my life, but more than that, he showed me that trust and teamwork can overcome even the most powerful foes. I am here to tell you that we cannot fight this war alone." Another counselor, younger and more cautious, spoke. "And what of your loyalty, Princess? You have spent years outside Varathis. Can we be sure you have not been changed by these humans? That your judgment has not been clouded?" Zyra's gaze was unwavering. "My loyalty has never wavered. I am my father's daughter, and I fight for Varathis. But I have learned something important. Survival requires more than pride. It requires courage to accept help, even from outsiders." The chamber was silent for a moment. The weight of her words settled like heavy dust. Tharok studied his daughter carefully. She spoke truth, yet the council's doubts mirrored his own. Could he truly trust a human, even one who saved his child? Finally, Tharok spoke. "Captain Kane, you have risked your life for my daughter. That cannot be denied. Yet our laws, our traditions demand caution. You will remain under supervision. But I will grant you a chance to prove your value. You will join our forces in training, strategy, and preparation. If you can show that your methods strengthen our empire, you will be allowed to stay. If not," his voice hardened, "the consequences will be severe." Kane bowed again. "I understand, Your Highness. I will do everything to earn your trust." The council continued to debate, but Tharok's decision set the course. Kane would remain. He would prove himself through action, not words, and Zyra would guide him, bridging the gap between human and Xylar, past and future. Over the next cycles, Kane immersed himself in Xylar culture, learning their strategies, their language, and their customs. He shared human tactics and new ways to organize fleets, new techniques for battle, and ideas for defensive structures. Slowly, Xylar soldiers began to respect him, seeing the value in his experience. Some were skeptical, but the results were undeniable. Zyra watched as Kane earned the trust of her people. She felt a quiet pride, but also relief. Her father's kingdom could survive this new threat, she realized, if they could overcome fear and prejudice. Together, human and Xylar, they might have a chance against the Nihil Collective. King Tharok observed from his command tower as Kane trained alongside his soldiers. There was something about the human, calm under pressure, decisive, fearless, that reminded him of himself in younger years. Slowly, Tharok began to see that trust, though difficult, could be earned even in the hardest of hearts. In the evenings, Tharok would walk the palace gardens, thinking. He watched his daughter laugh quietly with Cain, sharing stories of her time in enemy territory. He remembered the little girl who had run through the palace halls, fearless and full of life. She was still that girl, but now stronger, wiser, and capable of great things. The war was far from over. The galaxy remained dangerous. But with Zyra returned and Cain by her side, Tharok felt a small spark of hope. Perhaps the future could be different. Perhaps Varathis could survive what was coming. And in the depths of space far beyond Varathis Prime, the shadows of the Nihil Collective moved closer. Their hunger was unstoppable, their power immense, but in the heart of the Xylar Empire, a seed of strength had been planted, the promise of unity, courage, and a new alliance that could face even the darkest threat. The days after the council meeting were filled with preparation. Varathis Prime seemed to move with a new energy, as if the city itself understood something important had changed. Soldiers drilled harder. Engineers worked through the night, and the air was thick with whispers about the human captain who had earned a place among them. Cain was no longer just an outsider under guard. He was now a teacher, a strategist, and a symbol of something different. He trained with the Xylar soldiers, showing them techniques from Earth's fleets. He demonstrated ways to use speed and adaptability in battle. Slowly, soldiers who had once been wary began to watch him with interest, listening to his instructions. Zyra watched it all quietly. She moved between the training grounds and the palace, guiding Cain, translating his words to those who did not understand. She smiled more often now, though her eyes were still serious. She knew the war was far from over. Cain's presence was not just about her return. It was about survival. King Tharok remained cautious. He summoned Cain to the palace council chambers one evening. The room was quiet except for the low hum of the lamps. Tharok studied the human for a long moment. "You are changing my people," he said quietly. "They listen to you. They learn from you. That is dangerous and powerful." Cain met his gaze steadily. "I am here to help, Your Highness. If we face what I say we will, your people must be stronger, faster, and more united than ever before." Tharok nodded slowly. "You speak of the Nihil Collective. How soon will they reach us?" Cain's expression darkened. "Sooner than you think. They are beyond anything we have faced. They do not negotiate. They do not stop. They destroy everything in their path. Varathis is in their course. If we stand alone, we will fall." Tharok was silent for a long time. Then he spoke. "We will prepare, but not as Xylar alone. We will prepare together." The next days were filled with change. Cain was given access to Xylar archives and war maps. He began planning with the military leaders. Zyra stood beside him, translating his ideas, guiding him through the traditions and tactics of her people. Slowly, the idea of a human-Xylar alliance began to take shape. There was resistance. Many counselors spoke against Cain. "A human cannot know our ways," one said. "Our history is ours alone," another argued. But Cain did not retreat. He spoke with patience and clarity, explaining the value of combining their strengths. Zyra supported him at every step, speaking with conviction about her experiences in war and survival. Training became more than drills. Cain began joint exercises where human and Xylar soldiers worked together. They learned each other's tactics. They shared language and trust. The process was slow, and not all soldiers accepted him willingly, but small victories began to build respect. One day, Zyra watched as a squad completed a maneuver Cain had taught. The soldiers, once doubtful, now moved with precision and confidence. She smiled quietly to herself. Change was possible, even in a kingdom as proud as Varathis. Word of Cain's training spread. Citizens began to speak of him not as an outsider, but as a teacher and a leader. Some still whispered suspicion, but more spoke of hope. Even the soldiers, hardened by decades of war, began to see value in his methods. Yet in the palace, Tharok remained watchful. He knew Cain was not he, merely to teach. He knew the real war was not yet upon them. The Nihil Collective was coming, and the alliance he was building was fragile. Trust between species was rare. Trust in the face of war was rarer still. One evening, Tharok called Zyra to his side in the balcony gardens. The city lights glimmered below them, and the stars shone cold and distant above. You believe in this alliance, he said quietly. I do, she answered. Kane has changed the way we fight. He has shown me something important, that strength is more than weapons. Strength is knowing when to stand together. Tharok looked toward the distant horizon. I hope you are right, daughter. For if you are not, we will all fall. A week later, Kane was called before the War Council. This was his first time speaking there officially. The chamber was filled with counselors, military leaders, and Tharok himself. Kane spoke not as an outsider, but as part of their cause. He outlined strategies for defense, plans for cooperation, and the need for unity. When he finished, there was silence. Then slowly voices rose in discussion. Some were in favor. Some were still doubtful. But something had shifted. The idea of cooperation was no longer impossible. It was becoming a necessity. That night, Kane walked with Zyra through the training grounds. Soldiers moved in disciplined formations, working together. Zyra glanced at him. Do you think the king will trust us fully? She asked softly. Kane looked to the stars. Trust is earned, princess. But in war, trust can be the greatest weapon we have. Above them, the galaxy seemed quiet, but far beyond the light of Verathis Prime, a shadow moved. The Nihil Collective was coming, and the Human-Xylar Alliance was their first line of defense. The alarm sounded across Verathis Prime before dawn. The deep hum of war drums echoed through the city, calling soldiers to battle. The sky above the capital was filled with warning flashes, and the ground trembled beneath the approaching fleet. King Tharok rose quickly, armor clasped tight, his face sharp with command. The council gathered in haste. Outside the palace, soldiers moved into formation. Zyra stood beside Kane, her armor marked with scratches from years of battle. Both knew this was no ordinary attack. From the command tower, Tharok watched as enemy ships tore through the outer defenses. The Nihil Collective had arrived. Their fleet moved like a single living thing, swift and ruthless. Ships exploded into fireballs. The air filled with the smell of burning metal and the sound of alarms. Kane moved to the center of the command room. His voice was calm but firm. We must combine our forces. Xylar fighters, humans, and every ally we have. Together we stand a chance. Tharok nodded. Then we fight as one. No hesitation. Zyra led the troops into the battle zone, Kane at her side. The soldiers from both worlds moved together, a mix of human discipline and Xylar strength. Kane directed formations, adapting Earth's tactics to Xylar warfare. The soldiers followed without question. For the first time, they fought not as separate armies, but as one force. The battle was brutal. The Nihil Collective attacked without mercy. Ships were torn apart in seconds, space filled with debris and fire. The ground forces fought with desperation. Xylar warriors locking shields, humans providing precise strikes. Kane moved through the battlefield like a shadow, directing forces and saving soldiers under fire. Zyra fought fiercely beside him. Her blade flashed in the heat of battle, cutting through enemy lines. She moved with purpose, protecting her people and striking with precision. Kane covered her flank, firing weapons with skill honed from years of war. They fought together, not as alien and human, but as warriors united in a common cause. King Tharok watched the battle unfold from the command tower. His heart was torn between pride and fear. Pride for his daughter who had returned and led the fight. Pride for the human who stood beside her. But fear for the price they would pay. The Nihil Collective did not fight like other enemies. They were relentless, without mercy, without pause. Hours passed and the battle dragged on. The city shook under constant assault. Kane and Zyra moved together from front to front, rallying soldiers, pushing back waves of attackers. Their combined strength began to turn the tide. Where once the enemy seemed unstoppable, now they faltered against the human Xylar force. Still, victory came at a cost. Entire squads were lost. Ships burned, soldiers fell, their cries echoing in the smoke-filled air. Zyra fought through exhaustion, her armor dented and scorched. Kane's armor was streaked with ash and blood. They both knew that survival was not certain. Finally, Kane called for a final maneuver. He directed human and Xylar forces into a coordinated strike. Shields were combined, weapons synchronized. The enemy line shattered under their attack. The Nihil Collective ships retreated, disappearing into the dark reaches of space. Silence fell, broken only by the cries of the wounded and the hum of damaged engines. Verathis Prime had survived, but the cost was written in blood and stone. The city was scarred and thousands lay fallen. Kane and Zyra stood together on the battlefield, breathing heavily. Around them, soldiers tended to the wounded and mourned the dead. Tharok descended from his command tower, his armor heavy with battle. He stood before his daughter and Cain, his face unreadable. "You have proven something tonight," he said at last. "That we can stand together, that we can fight as one. But this war is not over. The Nihil Collective will return." Zyra nodded, her voice steady. "Then we will be ready, Father, together." She glanced at Cain. "We will be ready because we stand as one." Cain bowed his head slightly. "I am honored to fight with you all. This victory is proof that cooperation can defeat even the greatest enemy." Tharok's gaze lingered on both of them. In the quiet after the storm, he understood something he had not before. That the return of his daughter was not just a personal blessing, but the start of something far greater. The city began the slow work of healing, repairing walls, rebuilding defenses, and tending to the wounded. Soldiers who had once doubted Cain now looked to him as a leader. Trust was growing. The alliance between human and Xylar was no longer a hope. It was becoming reality. But above the battered city, the stars were still dark and cold. Somewhere far beyond the reaches of Verathis, the Nihil Collective was gathering strength again. They had been delayed, but they were not defeated, and the human-Xylar alliance would have to be stronger than ever before. In the days following the battle, the city of Verathis Prime began to heal. The streets were lined with workers, restoring damaged buildings and repairing the walls that had once protected them. The sounds of hammers and drills filled the air, while soldiers moved through the city, keeping watch and caring for the wounded. The battle had been won, but at a great cost. Many had fallen, and many more were injured. King Tharok stood on the balcony of his palace, watching the city below. His heart was heavy, yet there was a spark of pride in him. His daughter had returned, and together with Captain Cain, they had led the Xylar and human forces to victory. But the war was far from over. The Nihil Collective had retreated, but they were not defeated. Their hunger was endless, and their ships would return. The galaxy still held its breath, waiting for the next attack. Zyra stood beside her father, her face showing signs of exhaustion but also determination. "We have a moment of peace," she said softly, "but we cannot waste it. The next battle will come quickly." Tharok nodded, his thoughts elsewhere. "The alliance is strong, but we must not forget the doubts that still linger. Many of my people still do not trust the humans, and there are some in the council who believe we should stand alone." Zyra turned to look at her father, her voice firm. "If we stand alone, we will fall. Cain's people have shown us a strength we never knew we needed. The humans have proven their loyalty." Tharok's gaze hardened. "Loyalty is not enough. War is not won with loyalty alone. We need strategy, strength, and unity." He paused. "I will meet with the council tomorrow. There will be no more talk of isolation. We will stand united or we will fall together." Zyra's eyes softened. "Then we will make them see it, Father. We will show them the strength of this alliance." The following day, the council convened in the Great Hall. The room was filled with the usual voices of dissent and agreement. Some spoke for unity, others for independence. King Tharok stood at the head of the table, his eyes scanning the faces of the councilors. They had survived the battle, but they were still divided. The question of the humans remained a sore spot for many. Captain Cain sat at the back of the RER. His presence calm but noticeable. He had proven himself in the field, but now he had to prove himself in politics. Zyra stood beside her father, her posture straight, her eyes focused on the councilors as they argued. One councilor, a sharp-eyed elder named Vrylox, spoke first. "We cannot ignore what has happened. We fought alongside these humans, but they are not our people. Their ways are different. Their values are not our values. We cannot allow them to dictate the future of Verathis." Cain stood up slowly, his voice steady. "I am not here to dictate anything. I am here because I believe in the future of this galaxy, and in the strength of all those who are willing to fight to protect it. Humans are not perfect, but neither are the Xylars. Together we can be stronger than we've ever been before." The council murmured in response, some with skepticism, others with curiosity. Tharok raised his hand, signaling for silence. He looked at each of the councilors, his gaze steady. "Captain Cain speaks the truth," he said, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "The Nihil Collective does not care about our differences. They will not distinguish between human and Xylar. We are all in this together, whether we like it or not. Our survival depends on unity." There was a long pause as the councilors exchanged uncertain glances. Tharok continued, his voice unwavering. I have seen the strength of this alliance. I have seen it on the battlefield. I have seen it in the eyes of my daughter, who chose to stand with the humans. I see it in all of you who have fought and bled to protect Varathis. But I will not allow my people to remain divided. We will unite. We will forge a path forward together. The room fell silent. For a moment there was no sound, no argument. The weight of Tharok's words settled in the air, and the counselors knew that he had made his decision. There would be no turning back. Finally, Vrylok spoke, his voice reluctant but respectful. If we are to stand together, then let us find a way to make it work. Let us learn from each other, and let us build a future that will ensure the survival of all. Zyra smiled, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. She had known her father's heart, and she had known that this moment would come. The time for division was over. They had survived the first battle, but the real test would come with the next wave of enemies. King Tharok turned to Cain. You have earned your place here, Captain, and with it, you have earned the trust of the Xylar people. Cain bowed his head in acknowledgement. Thank you, Your Highness. I will continue to do everything I can to help Varathis stand strong. The council adjourned and the members filed out of the room. Tharok and Zyra remained behind, looking out over the city through the tall windows. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the broken streets. There was much to be done and time was running out. Zyra turned to her father. We have a long road ahead of us, but together we can do it. Tharok nodded, his expression resolute. Yes, together. As the night settled over Varathi's prime, the stars seemed to shine brighter, as if the galaxy itself had taken notice. The human-Xylar alliance had survived its first test, and now, the true battle for the future was about to begin. The nights following the battle were long. The stars above Varathis prime seemed colder than ever, as if the galaxy itself had grown silent in the wake of war. The city was scarred, but it still stood strong, a symbol of resilience. Yet despite the victory, there was a lingering sense of uncertainty that hung over everything. King Tharok, though proud of his daughter's return and the unity forged between humans and Xylars, could not shake the feeling that the true war was still to come. The Nihil Collective had retreated, but they were not defeated. They would come again, and this time the cost might be higher. Zyra stood at the balcony of the palace looking out over the city. The rebuilding was slow, but it was happening. The streets were lined with workers, and the sounds of hammers and drills filled the air. The people of Varathis were strong. They had been tested, and though they were weary, they were still standing. Her father joined her, his heavy armor gleaming in the dim light of the moon. His expression was as stern as ever, but there was a quiet pride in his eyes. We have survived this battle, but the war is far from over, he said, his voice low but filled with authority. Zyra nodded, her eyes never leaving the horizon. I know, but we've learned something important. The alliance between humans and Xylars is stronger than we thought. We can't afford to go back to the way things were. We have to keep moving forward. Tharok sighed, turning his gaze toward the streets below. I've seen the strength in our soldiers. I've seen the way they've come together. But some still doubt. There are those in the council who believe the humans are a threat, not an ally. They see them as invaders, not partners. Zyra glanced at her father, her voice steady. You've made your decision, father. The council will follow your lead. It's time we stop looking backward and focus on what's ahead. Tharok's eyes softened. I've spent my life leading wars, but this feels different. This time we fight not just for land or honor, but for survival. And that is a heavy burden to carry. Zyra put a hand on his shoulder. We don't carry it alone. We have each other, and we have Cain. Tharok's gaze hardened at the mention of the human. Despite Cain's role in the victory, Tharok had always been cautious. There were still many things about the human's past that were unknown. And the fact that he had fought alongside them didn't erase the distrust that many felt. But Zyra was right. The time for doubt was past. Cain had proven himself on the battlefield, and his knowledge of the Nihil Collective's tactics was invaluable. The humans had given them something they had never had before, an understanding of what was coming. I'll meet with the council tomorrow, Tharok said. I will remind them of what's at stake. We cannot let our fears tear us apart. We must remain united. Zyra nodded. And we will be there by your side. As the days passed, the tension in the palace grew. The counselors were divided. Some argued that the humans were a necessary ally, while others insisted that their presence in Varathis was a dangerous gamble. The debates were heated, and the air was thick with distrust. Cain, ever the calm presence, continued to work alongside the Xylar military. His methods, though foreign, had proven effective. He had shown them how to improve their defensive systems, how to think in new ways, and how to adapt to the enemy's unpredictable strategies. Slowly, the soldiers who had once been skeptical began to see the value in his tactics. They began to trust him. But trust, even in the face of battle, was not easily given. The councilors' doubts remained. They saw the humans as a threat, a wild card that could either be their salvation or their doom. And though they had agreed to form an alliance, the question of how to handle it lingered. One evening, as the council met again, Zyra and Cain stood at the back of the room, watching the discussion unfold. Tharok sat at the head of the table, his eyes sharp as the councilors argued. "We cannot simply hand our future over to the humans," one councilor said, his voice thick with suspicion. "They do not understand our ways. They do not belong here." Cain stepped forward, his calm demeanor never wavering. "I am not here to change your ways. I am here to help protect your people. We fight the same enemy. The Nihil Collective doesn't care about borders. They don't care about alliances. They destroy everything in their path." The room fell silent at his words. The Nihil Collective was a name that struck fear into the hearts of everyone in the room. It was a name that represented death, destruction, and hopelessness. And yet the reality of their threat had not truly sunk in for all of Varathis' leaders. Tharok raised his hand, and the room fell into an uneasy quiet. "We must be prepared. For the enemy that's coming, we need every ally we can get. If the humans can help us face this threat, then they will stand beside us." The council shifted uncomfortably in their seats. No one spoke for a long moment. But Zyra knew that her father's decision was final. The alliance would hold. Cain stepped forward once again, his voice steady and clear. "If we stand together, we can survive this. If we don't, we'll fall one by one." And with those words, the council finally fell into agreement. It was a reluctant unity born from necessity, but it was unity nonetheless. The next day, the human-Xylar alliance was solidified. The road ahead would be long, and the battles would not be easy. But for the first time in a long time, Zyra felt a glimmer of hope. The strength of their people, human and Xylar alike, would carry them through. The stars above Varathis Prime seemed to shine a little brighter that night, as if they, too, had taken notice of the fragile yet powerful bond that had formed beneath them. The alliance had been tested, and though it had not yet been proven, it had begun to take root. And in the cold reaches of space, the Nihil Collective watched, waiting for the moment when they would strike again. But this time Varathis would not face them alone.